coming up.
Yep.
I believe that it's very highly likely it's going to be banned, and it'll be the smoking of our time.
But then you could potentially maybe even go one step further and just sort of say, who knows where you're going to be in 5 years? I feel go in with no judgment.
Why not have fun and enjoy all your life and embrace the tough times?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Kieran, and today, basically, this podcast, what I'm going to be doing is just having some interesting conversations with people of a wide variety of people, and just wanting to see if there's ways that we can all learn and grow, and whether it's physically, mentally, spiritually, business-wise, critical thinking, any way, shape or form, as long as I think the conversation is going to be interesting, and as long as I can find something there that to take out of, I'm going to be interviewing them and just having a chat with them. And today my first guest is a guy who is about building resilience, and he's done a lot of charity work, and he has done a lot about trying to build resilience. And my first guest is Chris Barton. Chris, how are you today?
Good, Kieran. Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to have a conversation. May not be interesting, but we can have a conversation.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this now, Chris. I think that this topic is very, very interesting, to be honest. I really do. So for the listeners, can you sort of explain a little bit about what your movement is, what your movement is about? Step into action.
Happy to do that, Kieran. Thank you. I love walking.
Yep.
As you know.
Don't we all?
And I think, I don't think enough people do. So I think walking's the one thing that nearly everyone can do. It's inclusive, so it doesn't matter if you're 8 or 80, you can walk. But walking, there's more data saying it's almost the very best form of exercise for nearly everybody, and it lowers anxiety levels and reduces depression. And there's studies coming out of universities like the University of South Australia that says it can almost be a replacement for antidepressants in many ways. So walking is a very powerful tool. So I do adventure walks. So I walk hundreds of kilometres to raise funds for mental health charities. But my movement Step into Action is about getting more people to walk because it creates community and connection. And through the challenges I create, it helps people build resilience. But it's open to everyone, so that's why I've chosen walking.
Yeah, I mean, resilience training, I think, is a very, very big thing, especially in today's society, because with the rise of mental health cases, and with people being affected by mental health, whether that's the likes of suicide or any other mental illnesses, it really does. It can really affect people. I mean, there was a statistic there to what I did read, that in 2022 that over 3,000 people committed suicide. That's 9 people a day. Now, people might think that's 9 people a day, but when you also look at it from the outer aspect of it, those people there, then they all have families, they all have friends. So 9 people, that's 9 families. And a family is normally, whether that's a family of 3, a family of 4, then not to mention your friend group, all of a sudden you could be affecting 10 people. So all of a sudden that 3,000, over 3,000 a year could be, it's even though that it's 9 people a day, it's probably affecting 90 people a day because of it.
Correct. Yep. No, true. And those statistics, when you say 9, it doesn't sound a lot, but in the 16 to 24 age group and the 45 to 49 age group, it's the largest cause of death in Australia, more than any other disease, more than accidents, more than anything. So there's more people dying of suicide in many age groups than any other form of death. So it's a massive problem. And as you said, it impacts more than the person who passes away from suicide. It impacts their family, their colleagues, their friends, everybody. So it's a big problem in Australia, not just in Australia, internationally. And I'll ask your thought why you think it's becoming such a big problem. But resilience is one of the answers, I believe, to help reduce those numbers. Because, can I swear on your podcast?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead. You can swear.
I was going to say, shit happens to everybody.
No, well, that's not a swear word, so yeah, go on.
It's mild, but I check. Shit happens to everybody at some stage in your life. So it doesn't matter. Some people get it when they're 6. Some people don't get bad stuff happen to their 60, but it happens to everybody. And resilience is just your ability to bounce back after those things happen to you. And if you have strong resilience skills, you're less likely to be impacted by mental health challenges. Doesn't mean you won't, because sometimes some people just have depression and other mental illnesses regardless of their resilience. But even those people, resilience is helpful for them because it enables them to bounce back every time things become bad. So it's a hugely valuable skill.
Yeah, well, to answer your question, firstly, to what you sort of said there to me there, Chris, I believe that the times, obviously, the times that we are in now with the likes of social media, and just also, I feel like that there's, I don't know about you, but I feel like that there's been a lot more pressure being put on either both of those age groups, the young adults about to go into adulthood, and then also the people, and also the people aged 40 to 45 and up. There's a bit more pressure put on it, whether it's the external factors through the likes of COVID, cost of living, inflation, and all that there, or whether it's also just just stuff at the home and also just other things. But it just sort of feels to me that there's a lot more pressure being put on those generations, and not saying that there hasn't been pressures being put on across the board and what and so forth. I believe there is, but I do think that it does play a very key critical factor.
I think what you're saying makes sense, but I would add to it. You mentioned social media. The pressure's probably always been there for every age group, but before social media came, people lived in their own bubble. So particularly before the internet, so if you go back before the year 2000 and maybe even back to the early 90s, which you won't remember, which I will, people lived in their little community, but they didn't know everything that was going on in the world. So the pressure wasn't as great because they were comfortable in their bubble. But young people now in particular, the world's pressure is upon them because the world's so easy to access. So that's predominantly why I think it's occurring. It's because of social media. And to add to that, if you look at the data coming out of the United States in 2013-ish, suicide rates increased dramatically around that year. And that was actually the boom of Facebook and Instagram. So at the same time social media took off, suicide rates took off. So there's very direct correlations between social media, and part of it's the pressures felt because you see everything going on. You compare yourself to other people. You can see wars happening on other parts of the world, so you know all the bad stuff. The bad stuff is just there in your face all the time. And it wasn't 30 years ago. 30 years ago, the bad stuff wasn't in your face because you lived in a little bubble. So that, to me, that's the difference now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about 30 years ago, but certainly when I could remember before Facebook, you could definitely only hear about the stuff that's going on outside your bubble when it's on the news or if you read it in the paper. Nowadays, it's with social media, it's like everything that's happening on the hour. It's like what's big news.
Well, it's almost instantly. As soon as something happens, your phone tells you.
Exactly. So I definitely do agree with that, and I do think that the likes of cyberbullying, especially in early adolescent teenagers and the young adults, as you sort of said there, around 2013, that's when Facebook, Instagram, and all of them started to boom, and that's when also the suicide rates also started to increase. I feel like that there also was part. I mean, I feel like that also cyberbullying also had a major factor in that there, because again, it was something there to which we didn't actually sort of know, or we were into uncharted territory at the time. I mean, I think it's because the time that I think that when Facebook connects us, or not Facebook, but when a social media platform connects us, I think that some bad things are going to happen, and to which we didn't prepare for.
Yep. Pretty true. I think that's a very fair comment.
So my question to you is, Chris, is how do we, now that we're 15 years a bit too late, give or take, we could say we're about 15 years too late. How can we get to now? How can we catch up? And you talk about building resilience. How can we now, especially when there's all this social media going on, the likes of cyberbullying and just everything in this new tech world that's leading into this new generation, because the people there that are now like my generation are now growing up with Facebook. When they're having kids, they're now using their iPads. They're now posting stuff on social media. We are and all that there. So how do we now try to catch up, but also how do we try and find ways to grow and build resilience training?
It's a big question, that one. There's two parts, two ways I'll answer that. The first is you're asking, I think, how individuals can, and teachers and maybe everybody can grow their resilience. I would say if you just relate it very briefly, firstly, to social media, if we had a time machine to 50 years' time, yep, I believe that it's very highly likely it's going to be banned, and it'll be the smoking of our time. People will look back and say that social media was evil. Why did we do it? But that's a long way off. For the next 2 or 3 generations, things aren't going to change because that will take time.
Why do you think that? I mean, why do you think if we were to have a time machine and go 50 years into the time, why do you think it would be banned?
Because the data's now proving how bad it is. More governments are starting to look to ban it. In the States, there's a movement to ban social media for under 18s. It's getting strong traction. So there's all movement in that direction, but it will take a long time to happen.
Okay.
And it's exactly similar to happen with smoking. Originally, everybody smoked and everyone thought it's fine. Then there was a little bit of, it could be bad for you. And then over a period of 20 years, people realised how bad it was. And there's obviously some people who still do it, but everybody's aware that it's not good for you. And that will occur with social media. And so people will, in the end, I think, self-eliminate themselves from it. But it won't happen in your generation or mine. It'll probably be another 30, 40, 50 years, I think. So in the meantime, back to your original question, resilience is one of the only answers, because if you're going to be bombarded by that, and it's not just social media, but all the pressures of the world, and you can't handle them, then you're in trouble. So resilience is one of the skills you need to do that. So how do you do it? Resilience is actually learned. It's actually a skill. So it's something you can practice. And most people don't realise that. Most people, particularly in Western world, so I'm talking Australia, US, Canada, UK, first world countries, if you want to call it that, it's quite comfortable to live. So you actually don't need resilience until something goes wrong. So until someone passes away in your family, or you break up with somebody for the first time, or something really bad happens, you get cancer, whatever it might be, then you've got to become resilient. Because if you don't, you can't go on. And that's the critical point where some people can't achieve it because they don't have that, and other people find the strength in those hard times to do it. But what if you could build those skills before that happens to you? That's what I'm about with Step Into Action. So when I do my 30-hour non-stop walks, what I'm actually doing personally is I'm testing resilience in myself in a safe environment. But that if I was to walk 200 kilometers non-stop for 30 or 40 hours, all the challenges that would happen in the real world happen to me in that period, but in a safe way. I'm not going to die, hopefully, but I'm not going to die. I'm not going to do any real damage to myself, but I still get the same emotions and challenges. I get pain, I get heartbreak, I get injuries, I get my mind saying I can't do it anymore, I get bad weather, I get external influences, and how I deal with them, I practice those skills and I take them into my real life. So when it happens in the real world, I've got the skill already to deal with those things. So that's what Step Into Action, back to your original question, is about. It's giving people challenges, walk festivals, walk events that build their resilience in a fun, healthy, connected way. So when those real problems occur to them, they've got those skills. And anybody can learn those skills.
So what would you say in regards to building resilience? Would you say that it's obviously, it's the parents should also be trying to help teach their children resilience, but how can they teach their children resilience from such a young age, but without actually sort of because the way that's how I look at it is that it can also be a very fine line between building someone's resilience, but also dinting someone's confidence to a point. How do you sort of go along that fine line, and does it need to be also taught elsewhere in schools, and what are other ways that can be taught?
That's a very good question, because I get people of my generation and older saying young people aren't resilient. And they say it because they say, when I was raised tough, and it taught me resilience, and it may not have been always nice, but I built resilience. That's what they say. But there's an issue with that, and that's what you said as well, is there's a flip side. So in my personal opinion, it's good medicine to build resilience in your children or those that you teach or coach. But I feel like it was done the wrong way in the past. So it's about having emotional intelligence as a leader or a parent and understanding the individual you're dealing with, because some people react differently to how you deal with them. So you need to understand the individual you're working or you're parenting or you're coaching. That's kind of a first key to it. So I think it's good medicine to teach resilience, but it was often done the wrong way. It was too rough in the past and too tough. So I think you got to get that balance of still teaching resilience. And how do you do it? You do it by, in my opinion, by example. So it's not saying to somebody, you can't do this or no necessarily, but it's showing them in your actions. So great leaders don't say, they show. Okay. And they do themselves. And that doesn't matter whether it's a coach of an NRL team or a parent or a coach of an under-sevens cricket team. That's how good leaders operate. It's not just about the words that come out of their mouth. It's about their actions and behaviours. And that, to me, is the way to build resilience. So if you can show young people resilience in your actions and lead by example, I think that's a much better way.
You said there basically the way as to how we teach them as well. It's almost kind of like the old saying, different strokes for different folks. In the way of teaching, I mean, there are people there who are more your visual learners. There are people there who are more reading orientated, and then there's more people there that would prefer to just go out there and do it. So take a degree, for example. I mean, there are people there who would rather sit at home and just study and read all the literature, whereas there's a component, where in some degrees, there might be a component where you have to do prac or get work experience. People probably just don't like that. They would much prefer to do the other way, whereas other people would relish in it. So I do agree in the fact that you have to find the right method of teaching teaching resilience, and I do agree in regards to that. It's also by showing them, but is there, how do I say it? Is there a way that you can do it by putting them in the deep end? I mean, sorry, not throwing them in the deep end of a pool, but sort of like getting their feet wet, or putting them in the shallow end of a pool, so to speak, before the resilience is thrusted upon them and they're thrown into the deep end. What ways can we sort of do that, and how can it be done?
It's a tough question because it really depends on scenario, but I'll try and think for you now of a particular scenario where it makes sense. I'm thinking let's think about an under 10 soccer team or football, whatever you want to call it, depending on who you are.
Yep, or where you're listening to.
Where you listen, but I'll appease everyone and say soccer or football, but I'm talking about the round ball game, but it could be any.
The wall game, yep.
And you've got your 10-year-old.
Yep.
And they've just lost a match.
Mm-hmm.
And they get really upset. And they storm off the field. And they don't want to shake hands with the opposition, and they're just upset they lost. It's very common at that age for that behaviour because kids can be very competitive. But I mentioned firstly about modelling off you.
Yep.
If they see that type of behaviour when you lose, then they're much more likely to copy it. So if I have a 10-year-old or I'm coaching a 10-year-old's team and we've lost, and I'm a coach, for example, the first thing I'm going to do in front of a team is walk over to the other coach and players and congratulate them.
Yep.
As the coach. Just show them that that's okay and that's the behaviour that they should be doing. So I could, as a coach, say to them, go shake everyone's hands. But I would prefer to lead and do it the first time to show them it doesn't matter whether we win or lose. We pick ourselves up and we go and shake our opposition's hands. So that's what I meant by showing rather than doing. So as a leader, they get the message. That's what my leader does. They go and shake hands. But I would then have boundaries in place, I guess, to be firm that if a player won't do that, they don't play the next week.
Okay.
So have some fair, firm boundaries in place, but show them how it's done. And that's an example of resilience. Yes, I lost, but maybe it's only a 10-year-old soccer match. So go and shake your opponent's hand. Learn. We sit down then and we chat about why we lost and we learn from it. So again, that's a resilience skill. So it's not we lost, we hate this, we're all going to go home. We're going to spend 5 minutes and talk about what we learnt. So as a coach, again, I'm showing resilience techniques. And a resilience technique is not to lose it when something goes wrong. It's to say something went wrong, I lost. What do I learn from it? So I sit down with the team for 5 minutes at the end and I say, what did we learn today? We didn't pass enough.
Yep.
Or whatever it might be. That's why we lost. Or we weren't fit enough. And we've got to go back at training on Tuesday night and we've got to work on our fitness. And then everyone goes away and says, well, we lost today, but we know why. We can go away and improve on it. So you ask originally, it's a long answer, 2 questions ago about what can parents do or whatever it might be. That's what they can do. That's what I meant by showing by actions, because I don't expect a 7, 8 or 9-year-old to naturally be able to do that. It's not in human nature. They want to be upset.
Yep.
That's human nature. So, and if you just scream at them when they're upset, that's old school.
Yep.
That's what I was trying to say. The old school was punish you because you did it, but I don't know why. What have I done wrong? I just know it's wrong.
Mm.
What I'm saying is it's wrong, but this is how we improve the next time, and I'm leading with those actions. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, most definitely. It's also, I believe, it's the way as to how you're saying it, which is actually striking to me, is that it's also about building habits. It's about building habits that are setting the young generation up to, again, as we're talking about in this discussion, building resilience. You were then just talking about there with parents telling them, no, that's wrong. I suppose that there are some people out there that would say punishment, there needs to be a punishment. And yes, while that there is true that there does need to be punishment, but I do believe that I do agree in your sense as well is you also need to tell them or sort of explain to them why, and if they keep asking the old, like a normal 10-year-old does, as to how they back chat and just sort of say why, you've got to explain it to them, I feel. I mean, because at the end of the day, that's the way as to how I feel like that they could learn and could set them up into the future generations going forward, because as you just said there, it's just telling them, no, it's not. No, it's wrong. Okay, well then why is it wrong? And if they then just sort of say because it is, it's not really not really a good answer, which then can sort of set them up, which can then set them down a slippery slope going forward.
Yep, and can I just add one thing to that? Telling them is good if you also show them those behaviours at the same time. But if you're telling them why what they did wasn't working or isn't right, but you actually exhibit different behaviours, telling them's a waste of time. If you tell a 10-year-old don't storm off the pitch after a match when you lose, but they go and watch you on the Sunday and you get bowled in cricket and you smack your bat on the ground and storm off, you're showing them one thing but telling them the other. So you need to. That's what I'm harping on the point. But if true leaders don't tell, they show in their actions. That's the difference. So I know we're getting off topic to leadership, but true leaders don't tell; they show. They lead by example, and the very best. I know you love AFL and rugby league and cricket, Kieran, from our background together, and the very best captains. They always go back. They're not the ones necessarily who had the best speeches in the change room, but they're the ones out on the field that showed by their actions that people follow them. And it's the same whether you're a coach or a parent. So you've got to have both. You can't just tell if you don't do it yourself.
Yeah, I definitely do agree with that. I think some of the best captains are captains that are ones that definitely do lead by example out on the pitch. So, I definitely do agree with that. So swinging this back around, back into resilience, because we were talking a little bit about leadership, but now back into resilience. How do we
good for winding me back in? Thank you.
How do we teach resilience in the youth? Not the teenagers, but the young adults from ages 19 through to 29, 30. Because we do know that suicide is a big key important factor. It is a big killer, especially around young men.
Yep.
It's
like 70% of the suicide rate is men.
It is a big factor around men. So how can we teach the resilience in those in those up and coming young adults?
We spoke about setting example, but I'll put it back onto the individual. I think there's a few rules that I live by that we bring into the Step Into Action movement and some of the workshops I do, and I'll share those. And if you can understand these personal rules, they make a big difference. And I think the first rule is you can't control everything. So a lot of anxiety in particular that people get are worrying about things outside their own control. So they worry about actions of others. They worry about events that haven't happened yet. So usually things that have happened in the past or happening in the future. So they worry about external things that are outside their control. And in the end, all you can control is your actions and thoughts. And if you can control your thoughts and actions, then you will significantly reduce your anxiety. So it sounds almost too simple, but I want to share my personal experiences. I struggled with that for many years because I'm an overthinker. So I would always stress about things that are outside my control. And eventually, through learning this stuff, I realized that if I continued to do that, I would live a very unhappy life. So I made a decision to stop doing that, as simple as that, and only worry about things in my own control. And that one rule has made a significant difference to me. So that's one thing that we share in the resilience movement is you can't worry about things that are outside your control. You have to you can influence yourself and yourself only.
Yep.
So that's the first one. The second one ties in a bit to that. I mentioned anxiety is worrying about the past or the future.
Yep.
When you think about it, right now, you might, I'm not saying you do, Kieran, but you might have had an anxious morning. You may or may not have. But right now, while we're chatting, you wouldn't be feeling any anxiety, would you?
Not really. Probably at the start and whatnot, but
because you're worried about, is the podcast going to be good? So you have that feeling. But
of course.
If you're present in the moment, so you're actually enjoying the conversation and you're into it, you're not worrying about that at the moment, or you're not worrying about how you're going to edit the podcast in the future. You're not worried about any of those things. Hopefully you're enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, that's true. And
so
I am enjoying the conversation. Whoops.
So you're present.
Yep.
So that's the second key. Anxiety is worrying about the past or worrying about the future. But the problem is when you live in the past or the future, you don't enjoy the present. You're not present at that moment. And when you're not present in that moment, your anxiety is there. So you got to learn to become present in the moment. So something I struggled with for a long time, but about 10 years ago, I made a change and I said, I'm going to try and be present in every moment. So this moment with you now, I'm as present as I possibly can be. When I'm with my kids, I'm as present as I possibly can be with them as well. When I'm doing anything in particular, I'm present in that moment as much as I possibly can, because your brain will always try and start thinking about things again.
That's true. That's true.
So that's another key around resilience is if you can be present, you can reduce your anxiety baseline by stop worrying about the past and the present. The past and the future. And it might be things like putting your phone away. That's one thing you can do, because you can be much more present in a conversation. But if you're having dinner with somebody and you've got both phones on the table, you're not really present. So there's two. There's a whole bunch of them. I could spend hours talking about them, but there's two very personal, individual things that anybody can work on that will help build their resilience.
So it's almost kind of like taking it as you're wanting to, sorry for paraphrasing or whatnot, but to stick to a script. Like your life is essentially the script of your life. You basically determine how it's going to run, or another way to go about it is you're a book. Your whole life and your whole life's journey is a book, and you can determine how the book is going to basically be throughout the middle pages, and basically how you want that. Whether or not you want it to be full of anxiety, or whether or not you want it to be, or whether or not you want it to be full of happy moments, and how you change and how you can sort of live up to that.
I was going to say yes, but with a distinction slightly. You can determine how you feel in those times, but if you're worrying about external events, you won't, because you ultimately can't control any of that.
Exactly.
So that book, if you're talking about the book as your whole life, there's a whole bunch of things in that book you can't control.
Yeah,
you can only control how you react to them. That's the only thing actually in your control. You can't control today how I could say anything.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't control that. So you can try and stress about asking the right questions, but in the end, you can't control what I'm going to do. So kind of, but I feel more, if you take away the worry that you can't control most things, you can only control yourself. That's the key. So it's not about you. you write your own story, because you kind of do, but you only write your own story from what you can control.
Of course.
Which is little.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but it's only little old you or little old me that we can control.
Yeah, I mean, there's true. I mean, sorry to put books or old movies into that situation, but if you're essentially the main character of your own book, and everything that happens, you've just got to deal with it. You've just got to essentially, how you're going to cope with it, how you're going to handle it, how you're going to get to the next part of the book, and where is that going to lead, and what are the next challenges that are going to face you there.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way of putting it. And do you mind if I share the sort of third kind of personal skill, because you kind of opened up to one more that I might share, and that's most people live quite a roller coaster of a life, and I used to be like this again, and that is when things are going well, you're happy. Mm-hmm. So work's good, you've found a partner, you got money, you're happy. But when you don't have those things, you're miserable. So you go up and down on a roller coaster. You have a few months where it's good, something's good, then it's bad. And so you live in a constant roller coaster. What I discovered through reading and learning about these topics, and it took me 15 years of learning, read hundreds of books, listened to hundreds of podcasts, listened to the best scientists on this. So it's not just me making it up. I studied what the best leaders did. And I realized on that there's actually joy in all times. So you actually have to look for the joy in all moments, not just when things are going well. Because you can't quantify, but things go up and down like a roller coaster. So I don't want half my life to be fun and half to be terrible. I want all my life to be fun. So even when things are going wrong and in the bad times, there's joy there. And learning, and that's where you actually get your best learning from. There's that saying, I'm going to butcher it, but great sailors don't learn anything I butchered it. It's about when the seas are rough, that's when you get your learnings. When the seas are calm, great sailors aren't born out of that. It's basically just means you get all your learnings when things are going wrong. But if you're so busy being upset about it, you miss those learnings. Or
it's just like the old saying there, a coach doesn't really know what they've got until they've lost 5 or 6 in a row.
Yep, that's a great one. Or I'm thinking from a cricket analogy, you get your best learnings when you're having a dry spell of wickets or a dry spell of runs. If you show resilience and go, this is a time of learning. And the good and the great people come back better because they do that, where some people never recover from those because it just becomes emotionally too much for them, that they're not as good as they were.
Yeah, of course.
So that's the third one. A lot of rabbiting on from me, but to summarize it, it's just there's great fun and learning in the bad times as well. So why would you spend half your life having fun and half miserable? Why not have fun and enjoy all your life and embrace the tough times as times of learning and times of fun as well?
Yeah, I definitely do agree with that. And it's also something there to which, like you can also, I don't want to sound like this here, but you can also look back on it in a few years' time and just sort of go, why was I worried about that? Why was I thinking like that? Why was I this? Why was I that? And all that sort of stuff there. So it's also something there to which, as you potentially do start to get older, you can also start to then just sort of look back at it and even just, even have it as a badge of honor, saying that, that you got through this tough period, but also look at it and just sort of say, why was I thinking like that there through that time?
Yep, no, it's a good way, and I'm just going to keep going because we didn't pre-script this, but every comment and analysis you give leads me into my next learning. So I'm just going to give another one from a very wise person, my wife, Kerry. She taught me the 5 in 5 rule, and that's if something is is not going to affect me in 5 years' time, I don't give more than 5 minutes of worry to it. So when something goes wrong,
That's pretty good.
if in 5 years' time I'm not going to be impacted by it, why am I giving it more than 5 minutes of stress? And what you end up realizing is 99.9% of things don't affect you in 5 years' time. So it's a hard one to practice.
Yeah,
but if you can do it, you end up living pretty happily because you realize that 99.9% of stuff isn't going to affect me. So why am I wasting time stressing about it? So the 5 in 5 rule, and these are all resilience tools. So I'm sharing them to go back to your original question, because if you practice these tools, it builds your resilience, makes you a happier person, and ultimately probably a more successful person as well, if you can follow these sort of rules. So that's the 5 in 5 rule.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do agree with that 5 and 5 rule. And I think also, I don't want to sound a bit morbid about this here, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, for all we know, not to sound morbid or anything, but we could literally walk out this front door and get hit by a bus. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen there. So I think that putting that 5 and 5 perspective actually does, I believe, relieve a lot of pressure. And I think it would help a lot of people out there by just sort of saying, look, if it's more than 5 years, only think about it for 5 minutes or not at all. But then you could potentially maybe even go one step further and just sort of say, who knows where you're going to be in 5 years? Or, you might never know. So that's where I think you could potentially go one more layer on top of that and potentially maybe even just sort of say like, yep, get that thought out of my head or something there, because you never really know what's going to happen in 5 years.
Yep, no, it's such a great way of putting it. No, and that's a very mature way of looking at it. And people are going to listen to this and think that we preset questions in advance, which we haven't. Kieran didn't send me anything. And,
no,
and
I only sent you statistics there, Chris, of the research that I was making, and that there was it. I sent that to you I sent this to you 2 days before, and also just to confirm the time. That was it.
But we're just ad-libbing it, and the reason I said it again is you led me on to number 5. My last rule that I was going to share if I had the opportunity today. And you raise the point about it could be your last day. You don't want to be morbid.
Yep.
But I've had people ask me about that, and there's an exercise I was taught by a wise person, and it can put everything in perspective for people. And I'll share it with everybody in case it's of value. And it goes something like this. Imagine you're lying there on your deathbed.
Yep.
And that hopefully for us, that's a long, long way away.
Yep.
And you have the privilege of doing that, because not everyone has the privilege of lying on their deathbed. Sometimes, unfortunately, we're taken suddenly.
That's true.
But you have the privilege of lying on your deathbed, and you think about your life and you're looking back. How would you want every day to be? How would you want to live your best day? I try and live that every day. So rather than thinking in 20 years' time, I want to live my best day and I'm having a terrible day today, when I'm having a terrible day, I bring myself to that point and go, I'm lying on my deathbed. Is this really how I want to spend my last day? And if it's not how I want to spend my last day, it instantly jumps me or drops me out of that mood. So there's a potential tool people could use if they are feeling low, is to put yourself in that position. If this was your last day, is this how you want to spend it? And if it's not how you want to spend it, you have the choice to change that. No one else can do it for you. That's one thing you can control. And I know there's going to be, I just want to say one thing, Kieran. I know there's people who are going to say, Chris, that's right for a lot of people, but I suffer from depression and it's more than just a mood. And I understand that. There's definitely a percentage of people out there who need medication.
Yep.
But this is more a general comment for people who aren't suffering clinical depression, but might have days where they feel low and just not happy. Put yourself in that position. If was your last day, would you really want to be moping around like that? Because it could be your last day. As you said, we could walk out today and be hit by a bus. I'm going to walk separately with you so we both don't go if that happens.
You'll go one way, I'll go the other Chris.
But it could be.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got to live each day like it is your last day.
I also think that another part of the resilience as well is, do you think the knowing and of accepting and sort of saying, look, that there is like, I'm not okay, that I want to go and speak with someone, whether it's, you know, a friend, a colleague, or someone, just to sort of say, look, I'm having a bad day. I'm having a bad day. I'm feeling down. I just wanted to let you know, can we maybe even have the conversation? I feel like that there also builds character, because just going back to the statistics as to how suicide, especially in young men, and also in in middle-aged men as well, that there I feel like that men don't want to have that sort of conversation. We don't like to talk about that there. I mean, and I feel like that there also might add another bow of resilience of sort of saying, you know what, it's okay to just sort of say, you know what, not having a good day. I'm feeling a bit down, feeling a bit low. I just want someone to just sort of hear me, whether it's you want to go out and your friend or your colleague or whoever hears you wants to, take you to the gym for you to hit the punching bag, or, take you a place where you can walk and talk, or take you somewhere. But I feel like that there could also help in regards to resilience training as well, because again, the suicide rate and just in mental health in general is just skyrocketing. And I'll say that stat again there, nine people commit suicide a day. And I feel like that there might also, I'm not going to say it's going to get it down to zero, but it might help lower the 9 a day down to something.
Yep, no, it's a great point. Loneliness, or feeling alone, not loneliness, but because there's plenty of people with lots of friends, but they feel alone. So there's a distinction. You can have a lot of friends, but you can feel alone. So if you don't have somebody you can talk to, then I'll get to that. But if you do have someone you can talk to, so whether it's a partner or a mate or a family member, don't ever feel embarrassed to do that. Yep. Because people might be listening to this thinking, well, Chris doesn't sound like he ever gets that way. I do. And one of the best ways to deal with that is to talk to someone.
Yep.
And for me, it's talking to my partner.
Yep.
And that always helps me. So, but if you don't have someone close to you, there's amazing things like Lifeline where you can pick up a phone and speak to somebody. But it's hugely valuable. A problem shared is a problem halved often. Yeah. Just by talking to one person, you're halving your problem by getting it off and giving it part of it to someone else. So often that can be just enough to lower things like suicide. And it's why sporting clubs are so important, because people will go to their martial arts club or their cricket club and they've got mates or friends there who are like them. Yep. So those communities need to embrace the ability to be open about their feelings. And men have traditionally been poor at that. But it's a high level of emotional intelligence if you're able to share your feelings. Yep. So I say to men out there, I'm certainly not embarrassed about sharing my feelings if I'm not feeling well or I'm feeling happy. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's hard when you're a young man because you get raised not too often.
Yeah, of course.
So there's a question going back to our first thing, what parents can do. Allow boys to share their feelings.
Yep.
Don't tell them to toughen up when they're upset.
Yep.
Get them to share the reason why they're upset. And you're much more likely not to teach them that habit of holding in their feelings and being tough. Because that's particularly in the Australian culture, and I know Western cultures, that's how men are taught to be.
And I suppose also just on the listener, of the listener's perspective as well, is they've also got to, I feel, go in with no judgment as well. And I feel like that's part of a reason why a lot of people don't want to talk, because they feel like that they're going to be judged. Even if they go and see a professional to want to talk to, they will still feel judged. And I think that's something there to which that people, if someone does sort of say to them, look, I'm feeling down, feeling a bit down, I just want to, having a bad day, or even if they're just saying, look, I'm feeling down, I just want to talk. Part of that there, I feel like as well with the listener needs to just sort of say, look, no judgment. You know, if they say, look, for example, I lost my job a month ago, you know, feeling down in the dumps, haven't even been trying since, then it's for them to just sort of say, yeah, look, don't, you know, they might have their own opinion, but they should keep it to themselves and just let the person there vent, because if they were to sort of say to them, oh, look, you know, get back up, get back on the horse, come on, do this, do that, it could also sort of push them a little bit more. It could also push them down a little bit more, and it will then make them not want to open up, and it will not want to make them feel like that they can confide in you again, or come back to you again and ask you, or tell you when they're having a bad day, or saying, oh, you know, I just I don't know, I just got into a car, I just got a new car and turns out that it was a lemon or something. I don't know, or I'm just having a bad day, or I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, and you're just feeling grumpy and that there, and if they're going, you know, and if that person isn't there to confide in them, then it really does sort of affect them. And I do think that on the listener's point of view is that they've got to have a no judgment. They've got to look at it and say, he's coming to me with some problems. It's big of him. It's big of them to actually come to me and say, I need help, or that he wants to vent. I should do the best there and listen. Whether or not I have my own opinion, I shouldn't put that in. I should just hear how it goes, hear how our conversation goes, and then just take it from there and put my feelings to the side.
That's a very mature way of looking at it. I completely agree with you. And I think some people will go to therapists or psychologists because they're worried about being judged by family or friends. So they want an independent person to listen. But this is just my opinion. There's times in my life where I've needed that, but I've never gone to a professional. And the reason I haven't gone to a professional, I preferred to speak to a friend or a partner or somebody, is exactly the reason you've just said. I personally believe people don't want answers.
Yep.
So when they're sharing, they're not actually sharing their problems so you can answer with a solution. They don't want a solution. They just want someone to hear them. And that's all I know I need. I just need somebody to hear what I'm saying. I don't need them to give me 23 solutions to what I need to do, because generally I know what I need to do already, but I need somebody. I just need to half my problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And share it. So it's a great point about listening, and it follows on to one of the final rules. Again, you've done it beautifully. All podcast is the most liberating thing that can help you in that area is to not care what people think about you.
Yep.
So if you're worried about everyone's opinion about what you're doing or what you're saying or what you're wearing or any of those things, then you're always going to struggle to ask for help because you're worried how people are going to judge you. And I don't know if it's an age thing, because as people can't see, but people who know me know I've got plenty of grey hair now. I've worked out over time, I don't care what people think of me.
Yep.
I could not care less what anyone in the world thinks of me. And that might sound strange, but I don't care. And that doesn't mean I'm not, there's a distinction. Doesn't mean I'm not nice to people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I don't care what anyone else thinks about me, because I'm being authentic to myself.
Yep.
And as long as I'm being authentic to myself, it's okay for me to share with other people because I'm not worried about being judged. So it's got to come from you first. If you're worried about what people think of you, you'll always hold back on talking to them because you're worried about being judged about what they think of you.
Yeah, of course. I definitely do agree with that. In the fact that, and I think it also makes it a lot more harder. I think it makes it a lot more harder, especially given the social media age as well, and also given the fact is with people as well that there are some people who we do actually care about how they think of us, as to how they view how they view us and their opinions of us, and whether that's your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle, your wife, your husband, or your brothers, or whatnot. You do care about what they say, as well, and it really does also add another layer to it. But also now with social media, and as we were talking about earlier in the show, about cyberbullying as well, that I think increases that there. I think increased a lot, especially because with people wanting to put up the new trends and worrying about what other people think as well. If they were just to now just sort of, put up a photo, and if they just, and if it was just of them in their element, not worrying about it, then, that there is, as you said there, a way of building resilience. But there are some people in your life who you do care about, who you do care about in regards to their opinion.
I'll challenge you slightly on that point. I agree with you, but there's just one thing I'll say on that. If you're talking, you talked about the social media side, but you're talking about people very close to you, your parents,
Yep.
might be partners, kids, whatever it might be. Most people tend to unconditionally love you.
Yep.
And if someone genuinely unconditionally loves you,
Yep.
they shouldn't care about what your haircut is, what you wear, any of those things. That's not unconditional love. So in my life, if someone doesn't unconditionally love me for who I am,
Yep.
then they're not in my life.
Mm.
So you want people who in your life, in your close circle, who unconditionally love you for who you are. If you're worried about what your hair looks like or then probably you're worrying for nothing to say unconditionally love you.
Yep.
But if they don't, they may not be the right people to be close in your life. They might be a relative,
Yep.
but they maybe shouldn't be influencing you so much. That's just my opinion.
Mm.
Because it's like a dog. Take a dog.
Yeah.
Or cats to an extent, but more dogs for those dog people. You come home, dog doesn't care if you've got long hair, short hair, any of those. They love you and they're happy to see you.
Yeah.
That's unconditional. So I'd slightly disagree. You need to have in your inner circle people who unconditionally love you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely do agree with that. But I was just sort of just trying to sort of say there is that it is very hard to not care what people think, because you've got those people.
You've got those bonds.
Yeah, because you've got those bonds, and because there are some people there to who you just sort of is like I have to, like you have to get their opinion. You care about what they sort of say. It does add a little bit more pressure, and it can add a little bit more to the anxiety. And as we were talking about there now, in regards to building resilience, I think it does, in regards to what you just sort of said there, is that if they don't necessarily care about, or if they just love you unconditionally, that shouldn't worry. And you're probably worrying about nothing. So I do think that you are right in the sense that. And it is also a very big take there as well, Chris. I mean, if they don't love you unconditionally, or if they question one or two things about you as well, then that's not love unconditionally.
They can definitely question, but I'm talking about judging you, or making you someone you're not. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, then.
Because you can't control those people. As I said, you can only control yourself. But taking family out, if you're talking about friends or peers, I'd much prefer to have one or two unconditional friends than 50 who judge me. Because ultimately you're influenced by the 5 people closest to you.
Most
in your life. And I know we could probably go on a big conversation about this alone.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, hell, to be honest, we could actually do a separate podcast on this here ourselves. But yeah, I mean, most definitely. I mean, there are friends who, even in my life, who I respect, and to be honest, who I would ask them, and who I would then confide in them a lot, and it really does, I believe, add a little bit of element where it goes, don't want to let them down, in that sort of instance where, if you do come up with a problem, or if you do have a problem or something, that you just go, I don't know. I just don't want to let them down. Just don't want them to sort of look at me a bit differently and all that sort of stuff.
Is that because you're worried about what they think of you?
Well, yeah. There's what you could say is part of it, and that's where, you know, in the building of the resilience is the learning of not trying to care about that, and then that's where one of those 5 comes in, and that's where I think the building of the resilience from any age, whether it's from someone at a very young age, whether they're 6 or 7 or 4 or 5, up to even someone I believe in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s. I believe someone can, as you sort of said there, Chris, can actually build resilience, and I really do agree. I really do agree, and I am really loving this chat there, Chris. But unfortunately, we are nearly there, struck for time there. But I do actually have something there to what I want to ask you. It's something there to what I'm going to be doing there on my podcast going forward, and I am going to maybe even change it a little bit there as well. But where you can literally ask my next guest. I'm not going to tell you who my next guest is, but I've got a question, and you can just ask them whatever it is. It can be anything. It can be something about their growth or what it is that they want to grow about, or it can even be something as simple, as what's their favorite meal, what's their favorite sporting team, or something like that there. Or it could be something in regards to what we were talking about in regards to resilience, or it could be something about growing in different ways, whether it's as the nature of this podcast of growth. There are lots of different ways to grow, whether that's mentally, physically, spiritually, spiritually, business-wise, sexually, any way, shape, or form. There is a different way of growing. So my question to you is that. So my question, I'll leave that there to you, Chris, to ask for my next guest.
Okay, Kieran, I think I won't make it easy on him, and I'll relate it to what we spoke about today. But, you know, we had the conversation about, you know, you're on your deathbed.
Yep.
And you realise it was your last day.
Yep.
And you were living it. I'd ask your next guest to put them in that scenario. They think about them being on their deathbed, and this was their last day. What would they do in their last day?
Oh.
They do anything they want. What would they do in that last day?
Last day on Earth.
I know it's a bit morbid, but I want them thinking.
Last day on Earth, what would you do, knowing that at the end you then got to go onto your deathbed? Geez, that is a very big question.
There's a big question for the next one.
That is a very big question, and to be honest, that's actually even got me thinking. I mean, to be honest as well. I mean, oh, wow.
It was either that or what's your favourite pizza topping, but I think we'll go with the.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll go. I think we'll go with that one there, Chris. What would you? If today was your last day and whatnot, what would you do? So, yeah, but yeah, I mean there's the end of the podcast again, Chris. Thanks again for agreeing to come on the show. You're welcome back anytime. We are definitely going to be having more and more of these conversations with you and me there, Chris, in the future, because I feel like that there is a lot more to talk about. Not just in regards to building resilience, but just because we didn't even touch that you're also an entrepreneur as well. So there's a lot there that we can talk about in regards to business and just into leadership, which we touched based a little bit earlier on. But yeah, I mean, again, thank you again for coming on the show and for being my first guest. And yeah, we'll have to organise the set. We'll have to organise a part 2 for you later on.
Thank you for having me, Kieran. Anytime.
No worries. Thanks for that there, Chris.